You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Χαίρετε πάντες, εγώ είμαι η Εσέ και τούτεστην ζων හෙλληνιστί. Hello everyone, my name is Jesse Orloff and this is Living in Greek. In the past few episodes we've been talking about vocabulary. First I shared why I think building a strong vocabulary habit is important, and then I talked a little bit about spaced repetition systems and how they work. In this episode I'm going to take a little bit more of a deep dive into the tool that I use, the spaced repetition tool that I use, named Anki. This episode may be a little bit difficult if you're only listening to it. I recommend watching because I'm going to kind of walk through my usage of the app. And I think it'll be a little bit longer as well. So without any further ado, so to speak, I'm going to go ahead and start kind of getting into it. So Anki is a tool. It's an open source tool that you can get for free on desktop and Android. If you use an iOS device, you can get it on iOS as well, but it is $25. Well, that is pretty expensive for an average app. I highly recommend purchasing that. Anyways, it is well worth it. I have made that money back in value so many times over. And also, the primary place where I do my reviews daily is in the iOS app, and I suspect that will be the most convenient for most people. But if you don't want to do that, you can always use the desktop app or the Android app. All right. So how does Anki work? The first thing that you need to know, and it's a standard spaced repetition system, but there are some things about the way that it works when it's looking at your cards that I want to share with you. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I'll walk you through that a little bit. All right. Sorry, you got infinite me there. Let me pull up presentation mode here. All right. So what you have before me, or before you right now, is a little chart I made that kind of shows how Anki cards progress and mature. So the first time you see it, before you've ever reviewed it, it would be in a new state. When you hit the green good button on a new card, it'll promote that card into a learning state. With Anki, you can configure a number of learning steps that helps you to, you can kind of define a little bit how many times you need to see a word or a card before it is in your long-term memory, before it graduates, as Anki calls it, into a young card. A card is young. Usually if you haven't been reviewing it for more than a month or so, it would be in a young state, and then it would eventually, after about a month, would mature into a mature card. Now, some things I want to share here about how this works. In the learning phase, let me zoom in here and show when you hit the green good button on a new card, it will take your first learning step, and then you'll see the card again. For me, I have it configured at 1 day. On that next learning step, I would hit it again, and I'd see it again a day later, and then I would see it 2 days later, assuming I got it right and hit good each time. And then 3 days later, and then on the last learning step before it graduates, it has a little bit of flexibility on the number here because of something called Anki fuzz. Basically, in order to start breaking up your card group so that you're not seeing every card at the same time as other cards you learn in the same day, it will do a day less or a day more than your what's called your graduating interval. At any rate, that will promote into young. Now, if I got it wrong in the learning phase, I would hit again, and that will bring it all the way back to the beginning of the learning phase. So this is to make sure that you can get through the entire learning phase by hitting good each time. That will help to make sure that the card is really strong in your memory before it promotes or graduates into a young or mature card. Now, if the card is already young or mature and you get it wrong, you would hit again, and that would, instead of taking it back to learning, it would take it into the phase called relearning, which you can see down here. The idea here being that the first time you learn a word or any piece of information, it's going to take you more steps, and you'll probably need to see it more often to get it stuck in your long-term memory. But after you've already learned it once, if you forget it and you go back into relearning, it's probably not going to take you as much time to relearn that word than it did to learn it in the first place. So these steps are configurable. You could make it do the same number of steps, but it's generally not necessary. And I start skipping days a little bit quicker with relearning, but eventually it does graduate again back into young and continues to progress. Now, Anki keeps track of how many times you miss a word, and it will adjust the distance between the next time you see that word based on basically how difficult that card is for you. Behind the scenes, it's tracking a difficulty metric for every single card. So if you just, the word here, istoreo, if that word is just really hard for you to memorize for whatever reason, and I haven't figured out exactly why some words are just more difficult, but some words are just more difficult. It will track that, and it will adjust the spacing for you based on the relative difficulty of that word, which is really great. All right, so that's a little bit about how Anki itself thinks of cards and works. I'm going to now walk through an example of how I use Anki myself. So you can see here, I have my Anki open, and I'm going to go ahead and just dive in and review. And like I said earlier, I typically do my reviews on the phone, not on the desktop. It's a little bit easier, and it looks a little bit different than what you would have seen behind the scenes there, but bear with me. So, all right. So I'm just going to kind of go through it. I might give some commentary as I do this. So obscene speech, shameful talk. Escrologia, tes escrologias. Escrologia, tes escrologias, obscene speech, shameful talk. All right, I got that one right, so I will hit good and promote it. I'll see it again in a day. O patroloas, tu patrolou. O patroloas, tu patrolou. One who kills his father, patricide. O patroloas, tu patrolou, one who kills his father, a patricide. All right, I got that right. So I'll hit good, and I'll see it again in a day. Amemptos, blamelessly. Amemptos, blamelessly. A divine response, an oracle. This one. O crematismos, tu crematismu. O crematismos, tu crematismu, a divine response, an oracle. So I got that one right, and that's starting, you can see it's extending the timeout. This one's going to be 3.6 months until I see it again. If I would have gotten it wrong, I can hit again, and I would see it again much sooner than that. A removal, a stripping off. Apektiusis, tes apektiuseos. A removal, a stripping off. Apektiusis, tes apektiuseos. Good. Okay. So I'm going to jump out of here, and I'm actually going to show you now. So that's me reviewing cards. But if I do all of my new cards after I've done review cards. So the new words that I take in. So I'm going to go ahead and switch into an empty profile where I don't have any reviews yet and show you what that looks like. It's pretty similar here, but if we jump in here, I can study now, and you can see this is how I would go through a new card. I have the lexical form, and then I have an example verse that should, with context, especially as you learn more vocabulary, help you to discern the meaning of the word before you even flip it over to see the glosses. Avtos avte avto. Avraham eyenesen ton Isaac. Isaac de eyenesen ton Yaakov. Yaakov de eyenesen ton Iudan ke tus adelphus avtu. Maybe this word means his because it's right here by adelphus. This is a word that you would learn pretty early on and know this. I'm just doing this as an example here, but that's kind of the reasoning I would use there. And so then I'll show the answer and see like, oh, okay. So it doesn't exactly mean his. It means he, she, or it, depending on the gender. And then in some cases, it could be himself, herself, itself, or the same. So I would look at this gloss once. I'm not worried too much right now about really making sure I memorize this. I might read it a few times. Avtos, avte, avto. He, she, it. Himself, herself, itself, same. Avtos, avte, avto. And then I would read the verse again. Avraham eyenesen ton Isaac. Isaac de eyenesen ton Yaakov. Yaakov de eyenesen ton Iudan ke tus adelphus avtu. And then I would say good and move on. And then I would do the same thing with the next new word here. I'm not gonna go through another one here, but I just wanted to kind of show you my process and how I go through and say words here. So I'm gonna switch back to my other profile. So every day I will review the words that it shows me that are ready for review, and every day I will learn new words. Actually, let me correct that by saying I actually don't learn new words on the weekends. I've found that I like to give myself a little bit of rest on the weekend, so I don't take in any new words. And then one other thing that I do on the weekends is I use a filtered deck, which you can read about in Anki's documentation. I'm not going to get into that here. And I pull forward mature cards. And remember, I showed you mature cards are cards that are really in your long-term memory, and it's going to be a lot longer time before you see them again. I will pull forward mature cards from the weekend into the week. That way I can reduce my volume on the weekend. As you get better with Anki and learn how it works, I would encourage you to check out their documentation, learn about things like filtered decks, and start doing things to help you manage the volume of Anki and how you're doing that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you manage it. So Anki provides some really great statistics, and you can get to them here by going to stats. And it will show you things like, well, how many cards have you studied today? How many times did you get a word wrong? What were the statuses of those cards as you learn them? It'll show you things like how many cards are currently due in the future. What does your study habits look like? And what types of cards you've learned. But I think one of the most valuable things to look at in here is the answer button section. You can see there's 3 categories here: learning, young, and mature. And it will tell you, if you hover over these, what your percentage is for this category. So you can see that for mature cards, I hit the good button about 73% of the time, and the easy button about 9% of the time. So I kind of consider good and easy to be the I got it right, and those are right at about 82 to 83% correct. And then I'm a little bit higher on my young cards, so I think altogether I'm probably at 95% on young cards, and I'm about 95% on my learning cards as well. What I have heard and what I recommend is that you are shooting for a target of about 80% correct on your young and your mature cards or higher. If you are getting below 80%, you probably aren't learning the card well enough in the first place, and you may need more learning steps in order to stick that in your memory better. So the way you know is you just periodically review and you see how you're performing based on your answers here. One last thing that I want to highlight that I use Anki for is I use Anki as an on-the-go database. You can go into either in the app or on the tool itself. You can go in and view the database here. So let's say I wanted to look up the word agapao. I could just go in there and type that in Greek, and you can see it pop up here. I have an unmarked lemma, so that makes it really easy to search. But Anki's searching tools are very, very powerful. Again, I refer you to their docs to learn the details there. And then I can kind of look at that card, and this is kind of the view that I showed you before. For a verb, I have more information on the card. I have both the lexical form, I also have a root, and I have the principal parts. And so I might want to really quick look up the aorist principal parts. These are actually, I don't include the lexical form or the present active indicative in the principal parts here. I start at the future. But I've also added, and again, this is one of the benefits of Anki. Anki is very customizable. I want to call out here, as I say this, like, I started with a shared deck that I found from someone online on Anki's shared deck site. And since then, I have added a lot of information, and I've kind of modified the style of the card a little bit. All those things you can do with any shared deck that you get. And I've modified it to suit my needs. One of the things I've added is an additional information section here. And in here, I have the ability to, I link out to an inflection chart. So if I ever want to see more specific details about the forms of this word, I've linked it to Kata Biblon, and I can get any of the forms there that I need to. And so it's really quick. It's at my fingertips. I've also linked out to Logion to get the LSJ information. And as I said in the last video, I'm going to share my deck out. I'll put a comment in on the video that has a link to where you can get my deck and you can import it, and that'll give you some sensible defaults. But in addition to the regular vocab review, being able to pull up words and find out the glosses and get more information about them very quickly has been very helpful for me. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing now and kind of wrap up this video here. So Anki, it's a pretty fantastic tool. It has a lot to it, and there's a lot you can do with it and a lot you can learn about it. So what are I have some recommendations for anyone who's looking to get started here, because it is a tool with a little bit of a learning curve. And so I think having some things in mind when you go into it will be helpful. First, I mentioned already, I recommend you try to keep your young and your mature stats at about 80% in the good or easy levels. If you do that, then you should be able to consistently maintain a reasonable level of reviews every single day. If you are getting a lot wrong, if you're not really learning the card, then your daily reviews are going to grow and grow and grow, and you will get yourself into a situation that is kind of commonly called ease hell, which is that your reviews are so big and your words are building up, and you kind of get yourself just stuck, and you don't want to get there. But it's pretty easy to keep out of if you maintain your learning and you get your learning steps in a good place. So my second recommendation is in order to keep your volume low, which you need to kind of keep tabs on how long is it taking you each day to get through your words. There are really two levers. There are the number of new words you take in every day and the number of learning steps that you configure. So I've configured maybe 5 learning steps. And so if you are feeling like you're spending too much time every day on reviews, you can either reduce the number of new words you take in every day, or you can reduce the number of learning steps. Now, you have to balance that, because again, you have to balance that with the percentage of correct that you're getting, because you want to have enough learning steps that helps you to get to at or above that 80% number. And if you have too many learning steps, you're wasting time. So you can cut down learning steps to keep at that target. And if you don't have enough learning steps, you're going to be struggling with those words. So as you do this, as you review your stats, as you get used to the app, you're going to learn more and more kind of what your mind needs in terms of learning steps and how many new cards you can support every day. Another important recommendation I would give, in the beginning, when you're learning how this tool works, you could see that there were 4 buttons on the bottom of the screen. There's again, hard, good, and easy. In the beginning, I recommend that you never, ever, ever use hard, and you very rarely ever use easy. Try to use only again and good. If you get it right, hit good. If you get it wrong, hit again. That will allow the Anki system and the learning steps to make sure that you're learning words, and it will help to prevent you from getting yourself into that ease hell situation that I've talked about. You can go do some YouTubing or some searching about ease hell and how you avoid that and how you make sure that you're not wasting time doing cards that you don't need to do. Here's a big recommendation. Go read the Anki docs. They are really helpful, and they can kind of walk you through the basics of how you use Anki as a tool and how you can do things like fancy searching, how you can build filtered decks, how you can do some of the more advanced capabilities of the tool. But all that to say, I'm gonna share with you guys a kind of a baseline deck where I have already configured some default learning steps. I've already configured the order that you take in the words. I order them, by frequency, so that you're learning the most frequently seen words first. And then when we get down into the lower frequencies, I switch it up and order by the Septuagint frequency. And then I order by, later on, I order by the occurrence order in the New Testament. So if you were to start reading from Matthew through Revelation, the lower frequency words appear in that order. And the reason I do that is just so that, learning high frequency word first is good because you'll see them regularly as you're reading, but eventually you'll get to a point where you'll learn a word, and unless you know it's coming up soon, you might not see that for a very long time. And that is not reinforcing the learning of that word. And so by ordering it in the New Testament occurrence order, once you get to those lower frequencies, you can just start back at the beginning of the New Testament and start reading through, and you'll see those words more often. That's, once you've gotten a few thousand words in, so probably not something that you'll need to worry about for a while. You'll learn how the app works by then, and you might make your own changes to the ordering. So we're going pretty long now, and there's a lot here, and I realize that Anki as a tool itself can be complex and have a learning curve, but if you start with the sensible defaults and some of the guidelines I've given here, I think that you can get in and just start taking in a few new words and start getting your Anki engine going, and just come back and do your reviews every day. And if your reviews are getting too heavy, stop taking in new words for a little while until you feel comfortable, and then go back to it. But come back, do reviews daily, and take in new words, and you will see your vocabulary grow over time. You'll see your reading improve. You'll see your fluency improve, and it will seriously help you to maintain a higher level of vocabulary than you could ever hope to manage on your own, because the engine is doing a lot of the heavy lifting and thinking behind the scenes for you. So I hope this helps. Oh yeah, one last recommendation I give. Once you learn how to use filtered decks and you've read those docs, you can do really cool things like, I know I'm coming up on a vacation here, and I'm going to have a week at Disneyland or a week out, wherever. I don't really want to be doing much Anki then. So you can use a filter deck, and you can pull forward all of your mature or even your young cards, and you can do your reviews in advance. And so with a little planning and forethought, you can help to manage the levels of reviews that you do daily as you kind of fit that around your life schedules and rhythms. All right, that was the last recommendation I wanted to give there. So again, I'll share a good starter baseline deck for you that once you just import that in, you can just start doing it at your pace and start getting the benefit of the tool. And as you get more comfortable with it, as you read more in the docs, as you learn more about it, it will be an awesome tool for you. So this was a lot of time here today compared to my normal episode, so I really do appreciate your time. Thank you. I hope this was incredibly helpful for you, and I'll see you next time.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.